You're lucky I tolerate you. Most men wouldn't. My husband's words hung in the sterile air of the hospital exam room. His mother nodded slowly beside him, her thin lips curved into that familiar smile of agreement. I sat there on the crinkly paper covering the examination table, feeling myself shrink smaller with each passing second. This wasn't new. Marcus had said variations of this for years. But something about hearing it here, under the harsh fluorescent lights, with medical charts on the walls and the smell of antiseptic in my nose, made it feel different. More real. More final. The door opened. Dr. Patterson walked in, her eyes scanning the clipboard in her hands. She looked up at me, then at Marcus, then at his mother seated in the corner, like some kind of judge at a trial I hadn't known I was attending. "Mrs. Harris," Dr. Patterson said, her voice professional but warm. "Can you confirm how long you've been the primary caregiver for your household's medical and administrative needs?" Marcus's smirk froze on his face. "My name is Vanessa Harris. I'm 38 years old, originally from Columbus, Ohio." Before we continue with this story, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to this channel for more fascinating stories like this one. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my own life. We sat in that exam room waiting for test results. The silence should have been comfortable, but it wasn't. Marcus scrolled through his phone, occasionally chuckling at something on the screen. His mother, Diane, sat rigid in her chair, her purse clutched on her lap like a shield. "She's always been dramatic about her health," Marcus said suddenly, not looking up from his phone. He was talking to Dr. Patterson, who had stepped back in to check on something. "Honestly, I think half of it is in her head." I opened my mouth to respond, but Diane cut me off. "Vanessa has always needed more attention than most," she said, her voice dripping with that sweet poison she'd perfected over the years. "We've learned to manage it." Dr. Patterson's pen stopped moving on her clipboard. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in her expression. "Mrs. Harris handles all the appointments, doesn't she?" Dr. Patterson asked, directing the question to Marcus. He shrugged. "I guess. I'm busy with work." "And the medications? Insurance claims? Medical history documentation?" Another shrug. "She takes care of that stuff. That's what wives do, right?" Dr. Patterson set down her clipboard. "Mr. Harris, Mrs. Harris, I need to speak with Mrs. Harris alone for a moment. Would you mind waiting outside?" Marcus looked annoyed but stood. His mother's face tightened. "Is that really necessary?" "Yes," Dr. Patterson said firmly. "It is." The door clicked shut behind them. For a moment, I just sat there, listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights above. Dr. Patterson pulled up a stool and sat down in front of me, her eyes kind but serious. "How long has this been going on?" she asked quietly. I blinked. "How long has what been going on?" The dismissiveness. The undermining. The way they talk about you like you're not in the room. My throat tightened. Nobody had ever asked me that before. Not directly. Not with genuine concern in their voice. "It's just how Marcus is," I heard myself say. The automatic defense. The well-practiced excuse. He doesn't mean anything by it. Dr. Patterson didn't look convinced. She opened my file, flipping through pages I'd filled out over the years. Every appointment scheduled. Every form completed. Every insurance battle fought. Every medication list updated. All of it in my handwriting. "Vanessa, I need to show you something," she said. "And I need you to really look at it." She turned the file toward me. Page after page of documentation. All me. All my work. All my effort. "Your husband doesn't know any of this exists, does he?" I shook my head slowly. "There's something important he needs to understand," Dr. Patterson said, standing up. "And I think it's time he heard it." Dr. Patterson called them back in. Marcus entered first, that familiar expression of mild irritation on his face. Diane followed, her sharp eyes immediately finding mine, searching for what had been said in her absence. Dr. Patterson didn't waste time. She stood near the examination table, the file still open in her hands. "Mr. Harris," she began, "I've been reviewing your wife's documentation. The coordination of care, the medication management, the insurance navigation. It's quite extensive. Marcus waved a dismissive hand. Yeah, she handles the paperwork. So what? So, Dr. Patterson said, her voice taking on an edge I hadn't heard before, legally and practically, your wife has been the one holding everything together. Not just medically, but administratively, financially, and logistically. Without her work, your household health care would have collapsed years ago. Marcus scoffed. That's a bit dramatic, don't you think? I mean, it's not like it's brain surgery. It's just making appointments and filling out forms. Dr. Patterson's expression didn't change. Have you ever tried to navigate a denied insurance claim? Or coordinate care between multiple specialists? Or maintain accurate medication records across different pharmacies and providers? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Well, no, but... Then perhaps you should reconsider calling your wife's contributions just anything. Diane's smile, that constant fixture on her face, tightened at the corners. For the first time in years, I saw something crack in her composed exterior. The car ride home was suffocating. Marcus gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the familiar streets of our neighborhood, seeing them differently somehow. You embarrassed me, Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous, making me look like some kind of villain in front of that doctor. I didn't respond. What was there to say? She doesn't know her place, Diane said from the back seat, her voice sharp. Never has. I told you that when you married her, Marcus. Mom, please, Marcus said, but there was no real disagreement in his tone. Something inside me shifted. A small movement, like a door I'd kept locked for years, finally loosening on its hinges. I didn't say anything to Dr. Patterson, I said quietly. She drew her own conclusions based on the documentation. The documentation you created to make me look bad, Marcus shot back. The documentation I created to keep our lives functioning, I corrected, my voice steady. Marcus's head whipped toward me. What did you just say? I looked at him directly. I said, I stopped myself. Apologizing was automatic. Backing down was muscle memory. But this time, I didn't finish the apology. That night, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. The one I'd started when we first got married, thinking I was being responsible, organized, helpful. The folder was thick. Years of accumulated paperwork, neatly organized in plastic sleeves. I spread it across the kitchen table after Marcus had gone to bed, the overhead light casting shadows across documents that told the story of our marriage better than any photo album could. Insurance forms, all filled out in my handwriting. Emergency contact information, all listing me as the primary point of contact. Power of attorney drafts I'd prepared but never finalized, thinking we had time. Thinking it didn't matter. Medical histories for both of us, meticulously updated. Employment gap documentation from the years I'd taken off to support Marcus's career, which really meant handling everything he didn't want to handle himself. I saw my life clearly for the first time. Not useless, like Marcus implied. Not dramatic, like Diane claimed. Exploited. Every phone call to insurance companies while Marcus watched television. Every rescheduled appointment because his meeting ran late. Every medication pickup on my way home from my part-time job while he complained I wasn't making dinner on time. Every doctor's visit I'd attended alone because he was too busy, then had to explain everything to him later while he half-listened. I pulled out another document, one I'd forgotten about. The deed to our house. I'd bought it before we married, using money from my grandmother's inheritance. Marcus had moved in after the wedding. We talked about adding his name to the deed. I'd filled out the paperwork, but I'd never filed it. Everything was in my name. The house, the primary insurance policy, the utilities. Even a car I drove was technically mine, purchased with my credit, my down payment. The next morning, Marcus came downstairs expecting breakfast on the table, as usual. Instead, he found me drinking coffee at the kitchen counter, still in my pajamas. Are you feeling okay? He asked, frowning. I'm fine, I said. Then why isn't breakfast ready? I have an early meeting. I took a sip of my coffee. You'll need to handle breakfast yourself this morning. He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. What? I'm not making breakfast. You're an adult. You can manage. His face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, then anger. What's gotten into you? Nothing. I'm simply not doing something you can do yourself. He grabbed his phone and keys, slamming them on the counter.
Fine.
I'll grab something on the way. But you need to call Dr. Patterson's office and reschedule my follow-up. The time she gave me doesn't work. No, I said calmly. No, what? No, I won't reschedule for you. You have the number. You can call yourself. His mouth actually fell open. Diane appeared in the doorway, already dressed despite it being barely 7 in the morning. She always appeared when there was conflict, like a vulture circling. Vanessa, she said, her voice dripping with disapproval, you're being ungrateful. After everything Marcus has done for you. I looked at her directly. What exactly has he done for me, Diane? She sputtered. Marcus moved toward me. You're going to regret this attitude. Maybe, I said. But you're going to handle things yourself from now on. The first week was chaos. Marcus missed 2 appointments because he forgot to write them down. He got angry phone calls from his insurance company about missing documentation. He ran out of his blood pressure medication because he didn't refill it on time. He came home each evening progressively more frustrated, slamming doors and muttering under his breath. On Thursday, he'd gotten lost trying to find a specialist's office I'd been navigating him to for 3 years. He'd been 40 minutes late, and they'd rescheduled him for the following month. This is ridiculous, he shouted, throwing his briefcase on the couch. The medical system is impossible to navigate. How does anyone get anything done? I looked up from my book. I managed just fine. You had time. I'm working. I work too, Marcus. Part-time at the accounting firm, remember? The job you said was cute but not a real career? His face reddened. That's different.
How?
Because he stopped, unable to articulate the difference. Because there wasn't one. Diane called that evening. I could hear her voice through the phone, sharp and insistent. Marcus paced the living room while she talked at him. When he hung up, he turned to me. Mom says you're trying to sabotage me. I'm not doing anything to you, I said calmly. I'm simply not doing everything for you anymore. Same thing, he muttered. You told me I was lucky you tolerated me, I said quietly. So, tolerate me. Act like it. Handle your own life like the capable adult you claim to be. I scheduled a private appointment with Dr. Patterson the following week. This time, I went alone. The waiting room felt different without Marcus's impatient sighing or Diane's judgmental stares. Dr. Patterson greeted me warmly, ushering me into her office rather than an exam room. She offered me tea, which I accepted gratefully. How are you doing? She asked, and the question felt genuine, not perfunctory. I'm not sure, I admitted. Everything feels different now. She nodded, understanding. Vanessa, I'm going to say something that might sound unprofessional, but I think you need to hear it. I leaned forward. What I saw in that exam room last week concerns me. Not medically, but personally. The way your husband and his mother spoke about you, dismissed you, diminished your contributions. That's not normal. It's not healthy. And you don't have to live like that anymore. The words hit me like a wave. I don't. No, she said firmly. You have options, resources, support systems. You're not trapped, even if you've been made to feel that way. She handed me a card. It was for a counseling service that specialized in family dynamics and life transitions. I'm not saying you have to leave, Dr. Patterson said gently. But I am saying you have the right to expect respect, partnership, and appreciation. If you're not getting those things, you have every right to make changes. I left her office with the card in my purse and something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. I didn't confront Marcus. Confrontation would lead to arguments, and arguments would lead to Diane getting involved, and then it would become about managing their emotions instead of addressing my reality. Instead, I got organized. I made appointments with a counselor Dr. Patterson recommended. I scheduled a consultation with a financial advisor to understand my options. I updated my will, my power of attorney, my beneficiary designations. All things I should have done years ago but had put off because I thought we had time. Because I thought things would get better. Because I thought I was the problem. The counselor, a woman named Francine, was direct but kind. She didn't tell me what to do. Instead, she asked questions that made me think. What does a good day look like for you? She asked during our second session. I realized I couldn't remember the last good day I'd had. What would you do differently if you weren't worried about Marcus's reaction? Everything. The answer was everything. At home, I went quiet. Not silent, but measured. I responded to Marcus's complaints with neutral acknowledgments instead of apologies or defensiveness. I stopped volunteering information about my whereabouts. I stopped asking for permission to do things I had every right to do. Marcus noticed. So, did Diane. You're being very distant lately, Diane said during one of her unannounced visits. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. Am I? I responded mildly, continuing to fold laundry. Marcus is concerned. He can talk to me about his concerns directly. Diane's lips thinned. I could see her trying to figure out what had changed, where she'd lost her grip on the narrative she'd helped create about who I was supposed to be. The smear campaign started subtly. A comment here and there to relatives. A concerned phone call to Marcus's brother. A prayer request at her church for her troubled daughter-in-law. Diane told anyone who would listen that I'd become confused, unstable, that I was going through something and needed patience and understanding. She painted herself as the concerned mother-in-law, worried about her son's marriage and his well-being. Marcus let her. He didn't defend me. He didn't correct the narrative. He just let his mother spread poison through our extended family, while he played the role of the suffering husband with a difficult wife. I didn't defend myself either. Not directly. I simply continued living my life, attending my counseling sessions, managing my affairs, showing up for family events with a calm smile and steady presence. Then Marcus's cousin, Tyler, called me directly. Tyler had always been kind to me, one of the few family members who treated me like a person rather than an accessory to Marcus. Hey, Vanessa, he said carefully. I need to ask you something, and I want you to know I'm asking because I care, not because I'm judging. Okay, I said. Diane's been saying you're going through some kind of breakdown, that you're not yourself. Is that true? I took a breath. This was the moment. I could deflect, minimize, make excuses. Or I could tell the truth. Tyler, I said calmly, would you like to see documentation of who's actually been managing things in this family? There was a pause. What do you mean? I mean, I can show you receipts, not rage. Facts, not feelings. And then you can decide for yourself what's true. Tyler came over the next afternoon. Marcus was at work. I'd taken the day off from my part-time job, telling them I had personal business to handle. I spread everything on the dining room table. The medical documentation, the financial records, the insurance correspondence, the appointments scheduled, rescheduled, attended, the medication lists, the power of attorney drafts, the house deed, all of it. Tyler sat quietly, going through page after page. His expression shifted from curiosity to confusion to something darker. This is all you? He asked finally. Every single piece. And Marcus doesn't. Marcus doesn't know most of this exists. He's never asked. He's never had to, because I've handled it all. Tyler sat back in his chair. Diane said you were falling apart, that you weren't managing basic tasks. Do these look like the records of someone who can't manage basic tasks? He shook his head slowly. No. They look like the records of someone holding everything together while being told she's useless. The relief I felt at being believed, truly believed, almost brought me to tears. Tyler took out his phone. I'm going to make some calls. Set some things straight. The narrative began to crack. Other family members reached out, asking quiet questions. Diane's version of events started to sound less convincing when compared with the documentation I could provide. People started looking at Marcus differently, asking him direct questions he couldn't answer, noticing things they'd overlooked before. Marcus realized he was losing control of the story. 2 weeks later, Marcus came home from work early. His face was set in that expression I knew too well, the one that meant he decided something and expected me to fall in line. Diane sat in the living room, already waiting. They'd planned this. An intervention, an ambush, a final attempt to put me back in my place. "We need to talk," Marcus said. I set down the book I'd been reading. "Okay. This has gone on long enough," he continued. "Whatever you're doing, whatever point you're trying to make, it needs to stop. You need to get back in line, or—" He paused, looking at his mother for support. "Or we're done," Diane finished for him. "Marcus deserves better than this." I looked at them both. Marcus's self-righteous anger. Diane's smug certainty that I would crumble, apologize, beg for another chance. "Thank you," I said quietly. They both blinked. "What?" Marcus asked. "Thank you for finally being honest about what this is. I've spent years wondering if I was imagining things, if I was too sensitive, if I expected too much. But you've just confirmed exactly what this marriage is. An arrangement where I serve and you tolerate." Marcus's face went red. "That's not." "It's exactly what it is," I interrupted. "And I appreciate you making it clear. It makes my decision much easier." I stood up and walked to the bedroom. I'd already packed a bag earlier that week, during one of my quiet preparation sessions. I grabbed it from the closet and walked back through the living room. Diane stood up. "Where do you think you're going?" "Somewhere I'm valued," I said and walked out the door. I stayed with Tyler and his wife, Bethany, for the first week. They welcomed me without questions, offering me their guest room and the space to figure out my next steps. On the fourth day, I got a panicked call from Marcus. His voice was different. Higher. Uncertain. "Vanessa, we need to talk. Now." "We can talk," I said calmly. "What's wrong?" "The house. The insurance." He stopped, and I could hear papers rustling. "Your name is on everything." "Yes," I said. "I know. But when did you—" He couldn't finish the sentence. He'd assumed. He'd never checked. He'd never cared enough to verify the details of his own life, because I'd always handle them. When did I what, Marcus? Take care of the paperwork? Handle the documentation? Make sure we had a place to live and insurance coverage and all the boring details you never wanted to deal with. Silence. "I did that years ago," I continued, "because someone had to be responsible." "You need to come back," he said, and now his voice had an edge of desperation. "We can fix this. We can talk about it." "We will talk about it," I agreed. "With a mediator present. I'll text you the details." I hung up before he could argue. Diane called 10 minutes later. Her voice was sharp, demanding. "You need to come back and fix this situation immediately, Vanessa." "No," I said simply. "I don't. You're being selfish. I'm being smart. There's a difference." I hung up on her too. It felt better than it should have. The mediation session was scheduled for the following Thursday. I'd found a professional mediator through the counselor's recommendation, someone trained in family conflict resolution. Marcus and Diane arrived together. Of course they did. Marcus looked tired, disheveled. Diane looked furious. The mediator, a calm woman named Patricia, greeted us all professionally and showed us to a conference room in her office building. The room was neutral, deliberately so. Beige walls, a round table, comfortable chairs. "Before we begin," Patricia said, "I need to establish ground rules. Everyone will have a chance to speak without interruption. We're here to facilitate understanding and find solutions, not to assign blame or score points." "Understood." We all nodded. Patricia looked at Marcus. "Mr. Harris, why don't you start by explaining what you hope to achieve from this session?" Marcus cleared his throat. "I want my wife to come home. I want things to go back to normal." "And what does normal look like to you?" He fumbled for words. "Just the way things were, before she started acting strange." "Strange how?" Patricia asked. "Refusing to help. Being distant. Moving out." Patricia made a note. "Mrs. Harris, can you tell me your perspective?" I took a breath. I spent years managing every aspect of our household while being told I was lucky my husband tolerated me. I was dismissed, undermined, and taken for granted. When I stopped accepting that treatment, I was labeled unstable. I'm here because I'm willing to have an honest conversation, but only if actual change is on the table. Diane opened her mouth. Patricia held up a hand. Mrs. Holbrook, you'll have a chance to speak. Please wait. Patricia turned back to me. Vanessa, what would actual change look like for you? This was it. The moment I'd been preparing for. I'd practiced this with Francine, my counselor, rehearsing the words until they felt natural instead of terrifying. I want respect, I said clearly. I want my contributions acknowledged, not dismissed. I want partnership, not servitude. I want to be treated like an equal, not like someone who should be grateful for basic decency. Those are reasonable expectations, Patricia said. She looked at Marcus. Do you understand what your wife is asking for? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I never said she had to be grateful. You said she was lucky you tolerated her. I corrected quietly. That was just. He stopped, looking at his mother. I was joking. Were you? Patricia asked. Because jokes reveal truth, Mr. Harris. What truth were you revealing? Marcus laughed nervously, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times before. The laugh he used when he was cornered, when he was trying to deflect with charm. It didn't work this time. Diane interrupted. This is ridiculous. Marcus provides for her. He's given her a good life. She has no right to. Patricia's voice was firm. Mrs. Holbrook, I ask you to wait. This is your son's marriage, not yours. Diane's face flushed. I have every right to protect my son from what? Patricia asked. From his wife asking to be treated with respect. The room went quiet. Marcus looked between his mother and Patricia, clearly unsure which authority to defer to. Mrs. Harris, Patricia said, what do you want from this marriage moving forward? I looked directly at Marcus, not at Diane. I want respect. I want autonomy. I want acknowledgement of everything I've contributed and continue to contribute. I want you to see me as a partner, not as someone doing you a favor by existing. If you can't give me those things, then I'm done. The words hung in the air. Marcus's nervous laugh returned. Come on, Vanessa. You're being dramatic. We can work this out. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being clear. This is what I need. Can you provide it? He looked at Diane. She shook her head slightly, a barely perceptible movement that said, Don't give in. You're asking me to change who I am, Marcus said. No, I corrected. I'm asking you to treat me like a human being. If that requires you to change who you are, then who you are isn't someone I can stay married to. Diane stood up. This is absurd. Marcus, we don't have to sit here and listen to this. She's your wife. She needs to remember her place, and Patricia stood as well, her voice calm but authoritative. Mrs. Holbrook, you need to leave this session. Now. Excuse me? Diane's voice rose. This is a mediation session for a married couple. You are not part of this marriage, and your presence is counterproductive. Please wait in the lobby. Marcus looked panicked. Mom doesn't have to. Yes, she does, Patricia said firmly. This is your marriage, Mr. Harris. Not hers. If you want to save it, you need to have this conversation without her influence. Diane left, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The door closed behind her, and the room felt different. Lighter somehow. Patricia sat back down. Mr. Harris, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you love your wife? Marcus blinked. Of course I do. Then why do you treat her like a burden? I don't. You told her she was lucky you tolerated her. You've dismissed her contributions. You've let your mother undermine her for years. Those aren't the actions of someone who loves their partner. Marcus's face went through several emotions. Then he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. Fine. You want the truth? I'll give you the truth. My stomach tightened. I do tolerate her, he said, his voice hard. I could have married someone better. Someone from a better family, someone more, I don't know, impressive. But I chose Vanessa, and she should be grateful for that. She's not exactly a prize, is she? The mask had slipped. Finally, completely. Patricia's pen stopped moving. She looked at Marcus with something approaching disgust. Mr. Harris, do you realize what you just said? But Marcus was on a roll now, years of hidden resentment pouring out. She's always been adequate. Just adequate. Nothing special. And yeah, maybe I joke about it sometimes, but it's true. She should appreciate what she has instead of making demands. The silence that followed was profound. Patricia turned to me. Mrs. Harris, I think you have your answer. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there, absorbing the truth I'd always known but never wanted to face. Marcus thought I was adequate. Something to tolerate. A burden he'd graciously accepted. Patricia closed her notebook. I think this session has reached its natural conclusion. Mr. Harris, I strongly suggest you spend some time reflecting on what you've revealed today. Mrs. Harris, you deserve far better than what's been described in this room. Marcus finally seemed to realize what he'd done. Wait, I didn't mean… Yes, you did, I said quietly. You meant every word, and I'm grateful you finally said it out loud. I stood up. Patricia stood with me. Marcus remained seated, looking around as if expecting someone to tell him he hadn't just destroyed everything. The mediator is ending the session, Patricia said formally. I'll provide both of you with documentation of what was discussed here, but I think it's clear that reconciliation isn't possible at this time. Marcus finally stood, his movements jerky and uncertain. Vanessa, wait. Let me explain. You explained perfectly, I said. Everyone heard it. I walked to the door. Behind me, I heard Marcus's voice, smaller now. What are you going to do? I turned back. I'm going to stop being adequate for someone who doesn't deserve even that. I left him there, in that beige conference room, finally facing the consequences of his own words. 3 weeks later, I found myself back at Dr. Patterson's office. This time it wasn't for treatment. It was for paperwork, updating my medical directives, my emergency contacts, all the documentation that needed to reflect my new reality. Dr. Patterson greeted me warmly. Vanessa, it's good to see you. You look different. Different how? I asked. Lighter, she said simply. Marcus had insisted on coming, despite me telling him it wasn't necessary. He sat in the waiting room, visibly uncomfortable, while Dr. Patterson called me back to her office. I hear you've made some changes, Dr. Patterson said, closing the door. I nodded. Quite a few. Good for you. She pulled up my file on her computer. I've updated everything according to your instructions. You're listed as the sole decision-maker for all medical matters. Is there anything else you need? Actually, I said, I need you to ask Marcus to wait outside next time. For all future appointments, he doesn't need to be present unless I specifically request it. Dr. Patterson smiled. Already done. I flagged your file weeks ago, after that first appointment. He's not authorized to access any of your medical information anymore. Relief washed over me. Another boundary set. Another piece of my life reclaimed. We finished the paperwork efficiently. When I emerged into the waiting room, Marcus stood immediately. Everything okay? He asked, that familiar tone of concern mixed with condescension. Dr. Patterson appeared behind me. Mr. Harris, I need you to wait here for a few more minutes. I have some information to review with Vanessa privately. His face fell. But I'm her husband, which gives you no automatic right to her medical information, Dr. Patterson said pleasantly. Please have a seat. Back in Dr. Patterson's office, I sat down in the comfortable chair across from her desk. She pulled up a document on her computer, printed it out, and handed it to me. This is a summary of all the medical, administrative, and caregiving work you've documented over the past 15 years, she said. I had our office administrator compile it. I thought you might need it. The document was 10 pages long. Appointments scheduled, prescriptions managed, insurance claims filed, specialists coordinated, medical emergencies handled. All time-stamped, all detailed, all undeniable. Why would I need this? I asked. Because, Dr. Patterson said gently, in my experience, when people like your husband realize they've lost control, they try to rewrite history. They'll claim you never did what you did, that they handled everything, that you're exaggerating. This document prevents that. It's factual, time-stamped, and I'll testify to its accuracy if needed. I looked at the pages in my hands. Years of invisible labor, now visible. Documented. Undeniable. Thank you, I said, my voice thick. When I returned to the waiting room, Marcus stood again. What was that about? Doctor-patient confidentiality, I said simply. His jaw clenched. You're really going to do this? You're really going to throw away 15 years of marriage? I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm protecting what I built. There's a difference. Dr. Patterson walked us to the exit. At the door, she turned to Marcus. Mr. Harris, I need you to understand something. Your wife wasn't weak. She was patient. There's a difference. And now her patience has run out. His face went pale. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He was starting to realize what he'd lost. Diane made her final attempt the following week. She showed up at Tyler and Bethany's house unannounced, carrying a casserole and a Bible. We need to talk, she said when I answered the door. I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me. I didn't invite her in. This wasn't her space, and she wasn't going to claim it. I'm listening, I said. She set down the casserole on the porch railing. Vanessa, you're making a terrible mistake. Marriage is sacred. It's work. You can't just give up when things get hard. I didn't give up when things got hard, I said. I worked through hard for 15 years. I'm leaving because things got impossible. Marcus loves you. Marcus tolerates me. He said so himself. She waved a dismissive hand. He didn't mean that. He was upset, emotional. Men say things they don't mean when they're cornered. Diane, I said quietly, do you know what I realized? You've never once asked me how I'm doing. In 15 years of knowing you, you've never asked about my life, my feelings, my needs. Because to you, I don't exist except as an extension of Marcus. Her lips thinned. That's not true. It is true. And it took me way too long to see it. I picked up her casserole and handed it back to her. I appreciate you coming, but there's nothing left to discuss. You'll regret this, she said, her voice sharp. Maybe, I acknowledged. But staying would guarantee regret. At least this way, I have a chance at something better. The separation was finalized over the next 2 months. I hired a lawyer, a woman Francine recommended who specialized in cases where one spouse had been financially responsible for everything. Marcus contested initially, claiming he deserved half of everything. Then my lawyer presented the documentation, the house deed in my name, the insurance policies I'd maintained, the proof that I'd been the sole financial contributor to our major assets while Marcus had spent his income on personal expenses. The settlement ended up being fair, but firm. I kept the house, since it had been mine to begin with. We split the savings accounts. Marcus got his car, his belongings, and a wake-up call about what it meant to actually manage his own life. We met one final time to sign the papers. It was at the lawyer's office, professional and brief. Marcus looked smaller somehow, diminished by reality. As I was leaving, he called out, Vanessa? I turned. Was I really that bad? His voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. I considered the question, thought about all the ways I could answer it, all the anger I could express, all the hurt I could articulate. Instead, I said simply, you thought tolerating me was a favor you were doing. You never understood that love isn't charity, Marcus. It's not about tolerating someone's existence. It's about celebrating it. He didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I signed the final papers with a steady hand. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Pauline, witnessed the signatures and then smiled at me. You're free, she said. Free. The word felt strange and light and heavy all at once. Marcus lingered after I'd packed up my copies of the documents. His lawyer was already gone, and Pauline had stepped out to give us a moment of privacy I hadn't asked for. I really did love you, Marcus said, his voice small. In my own way. I looked at him, this man I'd spent 15 years with, and felt nothing but a distant sort of pity. Your way wasn't enough, Marcus. And I finally realized that wasn't my failing. It was yours. What are you going to do now? He asked. Live, I said simply. Actually live, instead of just existing to make someone else's life easier. He reached out as if to touch my arm, then thought better of it. Vanessa, Goodbye, Marcus, I said, not unkindly. There was no anger left, no bitterness. Just a door closing on a chapter that had lasted far too long. I walked out of that office into the cool afternoon air. Tyler was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his car. He'd offered to drive me, to make sure I had support for this final step. "How do you feel?" he asked as I approached. "Like I can breathe," I said, and realized it was true. My chest felt lighter. The constant tension I'd carried in my shoulders had eased. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, and then Tyler spoke. "You know what Bethany said the other day? She said watching you do this gave her courage to set boundaries with her own family." I looked at him, surprised. "Really?" He nodded. "You showed everyone what self-respect looks like. That matters more than you know." 6 months later, I sat in my backyard, the backyard of the house that had always been mine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I'd spent the past months rediscovering who I was without someone telling me I should be grateful for existing. I'd taken up painting again, something I'd abandoned years ago because Marcus called it a waste of time. I'd reconnected with old friends, the ones I'd drifted away from because maintaining relationships outside our marriage had been too much work on top of everything else. I'd gotten a full-time position at the accounting firm where my skills were valued and my contributions recognized. Dr. Patterson had called last week to check on me. "You sound happy," she'd said, and I'd realized she was right. My phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. "Family dinner Sunday. You coming?" I smiled and typed back. "Wouldn't miss it." Marcus had moved back in with Diane, according to Tyler. He tried dating but apparently couldn't find anyone willing to manage his life the way I had. Diane was handling his appointments again, and from what I heard, she wasn't as patient as I'd been. Good. Let them have each other. As for me, I'd learned something crucial. I was never lucky that Marcus tolerated me. That was the lie I'd believed for too long. The truth was simpler and more powerful. He'd been lucky I stayed as long as I did. And when that luck ran out, when I finally valued myself enough to leave, he'd lost the best thing he'd ever had and been too foolish to appreciate. I raised my glass of wine to the sunset, to new beginnings, to self-respect, to the understanding that being adequate for someone who doesn't deserve you is its own kind of tragedy, and to the beautiful, terrifying, absolutely necessary act of choosing yourself. Not lucky. Free. Finally, completely, wonderfully free.